Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending upon your location. Welcome to KW3 Consulting's Managing Project Escalations webinar. My name is Kirk Williams. I am your facilitator and presenter for this session for the next 45 minutes or so. Also working with me is my assistant, Ms. Pierce, who will help manage the Q&A and the questions effort as we kind of go through the presentation today. Just make sure by show of hands, can everyone just validate that they can hear me if they just kind of raise their hand sign? That would be great. Perfect, perfect. Good deal. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So before we kind of get into the actual presentation, what I wanted to do was to making sure that we all agree on the challenge that we are talking about today. We've all been involved in them, complex initiatives. They're tough projects. There are a lot of moving parts. There could be multiple external, internal dependencies. There could be multiple teams, multiple organizations, multiple business units that are involved with a particular project or initiative. And normally there are tight deadlines, which are stressful, and that actually brings about a lot of emotions. On top of that, we normally have senior leaders, the C-suite, the CEO, CIO, EVPs, and SVPs that want to get this project done, and they want it done well, and they hate surprises. And that really is the challenge at hand that we're going to talk about today. How do you deal with those surprises? How do you deal with the issues when they get escalated too early or too late? And really, the early and late escalations are really surprises that really throw the executives, your executive sponsors, kind of off on a tizzy and figure out how to manage that. So today, what we're going to talk about is really 5 strategies to help you manage those early and late escalations. But a couple quick housekeeping items before we get started. I just want to let everyone know the call is being recorded and will be available after the call, as well as I will make the slides from this presentation available to everyone as well. Throughout today's call, we will have a couple polling questions, so everyone kind of be ready to answer, and I'll let everyone know kind of when that starts. In addition, I really wanted to make this webinar really interactive and active dialogue. At any time, feel free to enter your questions into the chat box on your toolbar to the right of your screen at any time, and I'll take those questions as I go through the presentation. And also, we're also on social media. Feel free to tweet your comments during the call using hashtag Escalations. We are already tweeting as we speak. So as you have comments and general items you want to bring up, please tweet those as well and hashtag Escalations. Just a little bit about myself. I am the CEO and founder of KW3 Consulting. Personally, I've been involved in management consulting for the past 17 years. I spent 13 of those years with Accenture Consulting, primarily working in its financial services and technology industry practices. And the bulk of my effort was leading and managing large-scale, complex initiatives that both had a business and a technology impact. I've worked with small, large, and Fortune 500 companies across the board. Some include Wells Fargo, Cisco, Callaway Golf, JPMorgan Chase, as well as a couple of startups up in the Silicon Valley area as well. So for today's discussion, we're really going to do this in 4 parts. The first part is we're going to, at the very highest level, we're going to talk about the types of escalations to making sure that we're all on the same page. The second thing we're going to talk about is really taking each type of escalation and drilling down deeper and really discussing some of the key strategies that you can do to manage each type of escalation. And the third thing we'll cover is a case study. So we'll talk about a recent case study that KW3 experienced at a client where we had a series of individuals that, as I will call it, had many early escalations, which definitely caused a lot of churn on the project. So we'll talk through that and lessons learned and some solutions that we did for that. And at the end, we'll talk about some of the key takeaways, and then we'll wrap it up and open up to questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I wanted to do before we kind of jumped in was do our first poll and really kind of learn about who's on the call and just kind of understand for each person on the call what role that they're in and what are they currently doing. So you should see the first poll come up, and the options are program manager, project manager, business lead, technical architect, or other. So if you can take a moment and just click on which role is applicable for you, that would be great. Great. Well, it looks like, looking at the polling numbers, it looks like over half of participants are project managers, and several are program managers. So it's like probably about 3/4 of participants are in the project manager, program manager realm. We have some folks that are in the business lead capacity, and 25% that are in other. I think the interesting point to note that the common thread here is that whether or not, no matter what your role is, if you're a project manager, program management, technical architect, or regional sales manager, whatever it may be, Escalations is applicable in all of them, and we experience them day to day throughout our projects and initiatives that we lead. So the content that we go through today is applicable to all and can be leveraged across the board. So before we kind of get into talking about each level of escalation, I did want to hit on the point of communication styles. And from our experiences here at KW3, the way that you manage escalations really depends upon the motives and the behaviors of the senior leadership team who you work for, and how you present status to them and how you communicate to them. Oftentimes here at KW3, we use the DISC method, which is similar to Myers-Briggs and other types of behavioral assessment tools. And with the DISC assessment, it really falls into 4 areas: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And when one takes this DISC assessment, they're either going to be in the high D, low D, high for influence, or low influence, high for steadiness. And what we found in general that the senior leadership of a lot of companies, the CEOs, C-suite, tend to fall in the high D range, which means they're very direct, they're demanding, they want results, they want it now. They're forceful, they're driving, which leads us to, as we go into the next series of slides and talking about the different types of escalations, it's going to be important to note this particular communication style, because how we react to that and communicate that is indicative of the strategies that we'll talk through for each type of escalation. So let's to our first area, let's talk about the types of escalations that exist. The types of escalations that exist. There are really three buckets. One is the premature escalations, 2 is the accurate escalations, and 3 is the late escalations. And really the knack for managing escalations is really determining what's real and what's not real. And I think as one progresses from the project manager ranks to the kind of the program manager ranks, being able to decipher and manage all types of escalations and really determine what's real and not real is really, really important. And if I had to categorize, the first one, the easiest one, quote unquote, is the one in the middle, and that's the green, which is the accurate escalations. And this is when, as a program lead, project lead, or you're leading an initiative, this is one where you are in control, right? You're being proactive, you see issues coming, and you raise that accordingly to the powers that be. The 2 to the right, the premature escalation and the late escalation, this is really what causes a lot of heartburn, to be quite honest, because this is when you're pretty much in reactive mode, and the unexpected happens, and this is where you really have to think about how do you execute the right strategy to manage those premature escalations and late escalations to really keep your initiative / project / initiatives on track. So these are the 3 that we'll talk through this morning, and so let's just dive in and talk about the first one. All right, so the first one, premature escalations. This is really, as I coin it, as early escalations. And to be quite frank, this is really when there is a political nature within your initiative or your program or your project. From our experiences at KW3, from what we found is that premature escalations really happen when people have their own agendas. And they want to be the hero of the situation, they want to be the hero of the project or the program, and they're looking for ways to get in front of senior leadership. So they feel as though they have a seat at the table, and they feel as though they have a net worth that's applicable to this project. So really, it's kind of political, divisive, this type of escalation. And the net impact of this is it really causes additional unnecessary work for the project team because everyone's in reactionary mode and trying to either qualify or disqualify the premature escalation. And then it really diverts attention from the required activities that's required to get the project done and on time. If I had to give some adjectives, particularly for the premature escalations, I would say unexpected, highly political, reactive, it's a surprise, and the other key term I would use is unvetted. So the real distinction when you think about the accurate escalations, that's when you're in control and you're going through your vetting process. But when this premature escalation comes up, it's unvetted. And that's where it really comes down to the strategies you use to kind of manage that embeddedness, especially when you have to explain or react and provide some type of explanation to the senior leadership team or the C-suite or whoever is managing or overseeing your overall initiative and project. So when we think about some of the key strategies for premature escalations, the very first one is ultimately very, very critical, and it really is providing a consistent status reporting view. And this goes back to the point that you have to stay fact-based. And having this consistent status reporting view from the very start of the project and throughout the project, such that the executives see in their minds and they get used to a certain way of seeing status and understanding how issues come about and how they manage them, and so they can help manage the issues and the risks that come up. So what we've learned through all of our experiences at KW3 from our various projects and clients we've been on is that having that consistent status reporting view was ultimately one of the most important parts in really trying to manage this premature escalations, because it really helped us stay fact-based with the executives rather than he say, she say, and rather than having escalations based on emotion. And in the case study that we'll talk about soon is really one around this premature escalation when the escalations that happened on the project we're with was all based on emotion rather than fact. So leading with a consistent stats reporting view will save time, and help you and the team stay grounded, especially as you look to explain and vet where you're at with the leadership team around status. So one of the things I wanted to also share with you is some of the consistent status reporting templates that we have used previously on some of our projects that we'll make available post this call if there's a need. That's really helped us keep the senior leadership team focused and helping to manage any unnecessary escalations that may come up. So if we go to the next slide, the first of the two status reporting views I want to show is this one. It's a high-level program timeline. And we use this on pretty much every initiative that we lead and run and facilitate. And with this one it's different. It's a higher level roll-up of what you may see in an Excel or Microsoft project-based plan. And what it does is really hit on the far left side all the various phases of the project. And then across the top is the overall timeline. And what this shows is some of the key milestones that are coming up on the project and or what's been completed and or what's coming up. And one of the other unique things that we've also done with this particular timeline is if you see on the far left-hand side the bullet point items that are highlighted in blue, this helps articulate. We highlighted in blue the different color to articulate when there are changes to scope or time frames based upon the original expected date for these deliverables. So once again, it gives the executives a fact-based view to see how they're tracking, how the initiative is tracking against timelines, and also how scope is changing from a fact-based way. So once again, I mentioned before, premature escalations is all about staying fact-based, giving them a consistent view that they can see how the project is being managed, and that's going to help shorten the cycle in dealing with premature escalations. The next status reporting view template that we always use on our projects is a scorecard/heat map. And what this does is even bubble it up even higher for the executives to see, here are all of the key bits of functionality and or deliverables that are slated for this particular initiative, and that's what you'll see on the far left-hand column. Then across the top, you'll see all of the various key checkpoints and sign-off points that are required. And ultimately, what you want to see is, through this heat map, blue being complete, and then the far extreme, red being behind schedule, high risk. Ultimately, what you want to see in this picture is all blue and getting everything completed. But as a project progresses, as you kind of go from left to right, you'll see the blue, you may see some red, you may see some yellow. And that's a good thing. The red and yellow are good things, because what they'll do is they'll highlight to the executive team what areas they really need to focus on. And once again, going back to our previous comment, this is all about saying fact-based conversations, not emotions, not he said, she said, but truly fact-based, based upon the plan that you put in place, the plan that you're managing to, and also the plan that the team is actually executing towards. So once again, premature escalations, all emotion-based, they're normally unvetted, is very political, divisive, that it really comes about when you have individuals that are trying to get time in front of the C-suite, trying to prove their worth, as well as want to be a hero at the end of the day. So really, in trying to manage these premature escalations, is really having a consistent status view, staying consistent, regular checkpoints, and staying fact-based. And I think you'll see that the premature escalations will be very much easier to handle using these particular strategies. All right, so going on to the next one, this is accurate escalation. So in the high-level slide we saw this is the little center box. This accurate escalations to me is the ones that we're all used to, the ones we prefer to deal with. This is when we are ahead of the curve, we're being proactive, we are being preemptive, we know something's coming, and we know that there may be a change to either budget, schedule, or resources. And this is the proactive stance as a program lead, project lead, etc., in trying to get in front of the executive. So everything holds true. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, because I'm assuming that everyone knows how to manage the accurate escalations. Same tenets apply. Consistent status reporting view, having the right trade-off scenarios, being in front of leadership, and then also really managing, having the project management processes in place. So this is really, everything's in control, it's vetted, and it's proactive. Yeah. All right. Let's moving on here, just making sure we don't have any questions here. Yeah, so the first question we have is the first question we have from Mike Alpert is, can you give me an example of a fact-based versus an emotional-based escalation? That is a great question. So for example, a fact-based escalation. Let's say that you are leading a business intelligence project initiative where you're building a brand new data warehouse. And on that initiative, you have key deadlines, and you know that your critical path to completing the project is finishing maybe the design spec for a particular data source or data system. And you know that that particular deliverable is 2 weeks behind schedule, and you know the impact of that particular deliverable being behind 2 weeks will slip the whole project by another 2 weeks. So that is a fact-based escalation. It's based on the plan. It's based upon the start and end dates, the work estimates that you have in your work plan. You know that if this deliverable is not delivered, there's a downward impact from a timeline and schedule standpoint. So that's really a fact-based escalation. Emotional-based escalation is where it's basically not fact-based. It's someone that kind of comes up and kind of throws a flag. Well, stuff doesn't seem to be going right. It doesn't feel right. It's not right. But there's no fact behind it. There's a recent situation where we were involved with a client, and one of the client representatives, I'm not sure if she was used to working with consultants, or maybe the project that was taking on was probably bigger than what was the magnitude that was bigger than other previous projects. And she was constantly in front of the CEO raising red flags that this is not working, that's not working, this is not working, that's not working, and she didn't feel comfortable that we were on track. But there was nothing there that was concrete based. So what we do, we would pull out our consistent status reporting view, our program status scorecard, our project scorecard, and help and have her point out where things aren't going right, because we were basing our stuff off a fact-based reporting view, and not hearsay, not how I feel, it doesn't feel right, it's not comfortable, but more about fact-based. So that's really kind of the difference between fact-based versus emotion. Mike, I hope I answered your question. Great. All right. So let's go on to, and please, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat window, and I'll answer them as we go. And remember, feel free to tweet hashtag escalations with your comments on social media as well. With the next area we'll talk about is really late escalations. And this is really when, as a lead, as a project, as a program manager, you are caught off guard because there's someone on your team that has previously said that I'm on track, and then all of a sudden an important milestone or deliverable is missed. And this really tends to happen when you have team members that kind of work in silos. There's siloed thinking. They're not really communicating as such to the lead of the project about what's going on. So this is really another example where it's reactive and where it's surprised, and you have to figure out how to manage that. And it's really where you really have a miscommunication that has occurred among the team. And then also, if we think about going back to the DISC assessment and how we kind of measure the behaviors, the DISC, for this one, individuals that tend to kind of fall into this category that may have missed a milestone and that may not have been escalated are really in the kind of the high C and high S, meaning they don't like to be rushed. They want to take their time. They want to get it perfect. They may not necessarily care about the timelines that need to happen and the ricochet or the impact of not delivering according to timeline. So that's kind of the DISC and the behavior method that you normally see when individuals have that kind of silo thinking, and they're not really thinking about the overall big picture standpoint and what's the implications of them not making a timeline or a key deliverable. Particularly when you have these late escalations, if it really is on the extreme or the high importance that there's a late escalation and a late deliverable missed, it means that most likely there is some impact to schedule, timeline, or resources or budget. With that, one of the key strategies for managing the late escalations is really using trade-off scenarios. And what do I mean by that? Given that your senior leadership, your C-suite, CEO, CIO, COO, CMO, CFO, or any of your EVPs, SVPs, they're high Ds, as we talked about before. Dominance, they want action, they want a plan, they're driving, they're forceful. So to react to a late escalation, you really need to come to the table with options and trade-offs, and those are called trade-off scenarios. And what that is we know we missed a deliverable, and it's an impact to our timeline, schedule, etc., or budget. But here are some options that we can do to get the project back on track. And normally with the trade-off scenarios, you give 3 options, and one option is probably less likely, less feasible, Your middle option is one that is probably somewhat feasible but not your preferred, and your third option is really the one that you really want the executives to agree to. So I have a template here that we'll go through. So we look at the trade-off scenario template. When you come up with your three options, you're normally going to talk about, well, here's the option, here's the scope of the option, and what's different. Is there a change in scope, change in budget, change in timeline? What's the revised delivery date? What's the pros and the cons to each option? Are there any dependencies? Are there dependencies within the organization with other business units, other teams? Are there external dependencies with vendors that you're waiting for delivery on? And then ultimately, what you want to do with those three options is pick one and recommend one to the senior suite. And what this does is, from a leadership standpoint and a project and program management standpoint, what this does, it gives you the ability to come into the conversation. It's not going to be an easy one, but you come in with a fact-based view of how to handle it, and you also create a sense that you have the project under control and that you're managing the late escalation. You acknowledge that there's late escalation or a mistake, but this is how we're going to deal with it. Here are options, and here's what I recommend. Here I recommend. And in addition, the second template that we have, or tool that we use from a project scenario, trade-off scenario template, is that normally for each option we will present a high-level view of the option, which includes a high-level view of scope or a change in scope, adjustment to scope, which you'll see right here. And then we'll also talk about the resources. If there's change in resources and timing and hours that affects the budget, we give that high-level view. In addition, we also talk about, from high-level timeline, what changes with the timeline. When do we expect the deliverables to now be delivered? What is the slippage, and what is the new delivery date if the end delivery date does change? So normally we put this packet together from a high-level view, from three options, and really give the details for each one of those to really give the executive, the C-suite, the ability to digest it, understand the pros and cons of each one of them, and then ultimately making one recommendation for that. All right, we have two questions here. So the first one I have is from Ian Brooks. The question reads, prior to addressing premature, accurate, late escalations, is it appropriate to develop and or communicate with project stakeholders the escalation process, which issues should be raised to whom, and within which time frame prior to the project starting? If so, do you have an example of how this may have helped mitigate an escalation on a project? Absolutely. So with that question, couple ways to answer that. The first thing, as part of your project or program management processes, when you develop your approach to managing the project, and oftentimes what we do is we create a steering committee structure for every project that we're on that includes the senior executives that are responsible for the project, overseeing the project, and have a vested interest in getting this project done. And oftentimes that is someone from the C-suite, the CEO, CFO, COO, and probably EVPs and SVPs. And what we do is we establish these steering committees. They meet once a week, and we review the consistent status reporting review, as well as talk about any issues, risks, anything like that. But then in addition, what we also do talk about is how they want to manage escalations and how they would like to see that. I think by having and actually doing that as part of your process, that definitely helps. Sometimes you will still continue to be cut off guard with those premature escalations, because sometimes it does get more political than not, particularly within one of the client situations that we're in, where we had established a lot of these processes already, but there was still that anticipation of, or still the unexpected premature escalations that would come from certain individuals at the client site. So it still begged a challenge, but it did lessen the impact of having premature escalations, because as soon as one of those premature escalations came about, we got an email at midnight from the CEO or CFO around what was going on. So it definitely helps to mitigate that, but depending upon the political nature of the environment or the project and program, it may still happen, but hopefully it will mitigate that. So, Mr. Brooks, hopefully that answered your question. I have a question from Portia as well. What strategies have you used to establish a consistent understanding across the project team of when, what to escalate, and the appropriate path of escalation? Great question. Normally with every project, what we do is we have a project kickoff meeting, and a part of that project kickoff meeting, we will go through a number of things. We will talk about, one, to confirm the scope, the business objectives for this project, as well as what are the business drivers and what we're trying to accomplish, and how it affects the bottom line of the actual the business. Two, we will also talk about the overall team structure, who's on the team, who has what role. And then also the third thing, we'll go through the project and program management processes. Everything from risk management to escalation management to issues, how they want to manage the work plan, status, and everything else. So those are part of our process. We vet through all those program management processes and make sure that we answer questions coming from the team to make sure they have any questions. Then also what we'll do is we will post that to a shared directory to our team site, normally in SharePoint or some other shared space, Google Drive, something like that, so it's easily accessible. So what we try to do from a KW3 standpoint in our projects is really communicate that early on during the project and make it well known of the escalation path and the process that we have. So Portia, hope that answered your question. Any other questions there? And I think that's all the questions I have at this point. Ian and Portia, thank you for the questions. Once again, if you have questions, feel free to insert those into the chat window or the questions box, and we'll answer them kind of as we go. So just kind of summing up with the late escalations piece, as I mentioned, we just kind of walked through the trade-off scenario template. The trade-off scenarios is really the ultimate key to managing late escalations. The tone in the room is going to be high and very probably tense as I might expect, because no senior leadership individual wants to know of an unsurprised escalation, wants to know about a surprise escalation coming from a late escalation. So giving the trade-off scenarios, working with the consistent staff supporting view is really going to help lead with a fact-based way, which will hopefully calm the concerns and calm the fears and really assure the leadership team that you really have it under control. Great. All right. So I think we're going to move into our next poll. And I want to hear from everyone here, based on everything we talked about from an escalation standpoint, the early, the late, as well as the accurate escalations. What type of escalations have you seen most on your project? So I'm going to open up the polls here. And I'd love to kind of get your feedback on if you see more premature, accurate, or late escalations. Okay, give you another 10 seconds to answer. Great. So looking at the polls, what I see is that 54% of our participants on the call today you really deal with premature escalations, and 31% deal with late escalations, and 15% deal with accurate escalations. So it's an interesting point, kind of per our previous conversation, or per our early discussion around the three types of escalations. that premature and late tend to be the most common and cause probably the most stress and the most havoc. So I think our conversations that we've had just now, really in regards to the 3 escalations and the strategies that we actually do to actually manage escalations is really important, because premature and late escalations cause stress. And what it does, it causes even more stress among the senior leadership team, because it really brings about surprises, and no one likes surprises. As you know, the senior leadership team really wants the initiatives executed well and done right. So yeah, so thank you for your feedback on that one. Is there anyone, I can open up the call here. Is anyone, can anyone give an example of maybe a premature escalation and kind of their thoughts and kind of how they've handled it and previously? And you can raise your hand, and then I can call on you. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on how you've handled it, kind of based upon what we've seen here, kind of in the strategies we've kind of talked through, and kind of how you've kind of handled it. Anyone want to comment on that? I think I see a hand here, Ian Brooks. Can you, and I know you had some examples, or you raised your hand, any example that you're talking about around a premature escalation, kind of how you've handled it and how it kind of compares to the strategies that we've talked about?
Oh, sure. Thank you for on the call. We definitely want to link this chicken fold to what types of escalations I covered most, but really down around the premature escalations where it's a lot more political.
Hey Ian, can you talk a little louder?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Really been around the political nature. I tried to speak once, I apologize. Can you hear me a little bit better?
That's better.
Okay. So a lot of the escalations I've had to deal with on a number of my projects have been political in nature, where a lot of projects I've worked on have been IT change management and across large organizations, and really been changing roles, org structure, and requiring a little bit more communication and even training in that respect. And so trying to manage and herd the cats, if you will, for people to do something a little bit differently tomorrow than they're doing today. I've really seen a number of some pushback, as well as some escalations around, I think, as you, I think on one of your projects you alluded to, someone's roles changing and constant pushback and resistance, just from an avoidance standpoint.
Right.
And specific to the projects I've worked on, really has been some of the avoidance of what maybe not everyone was bought in to the process and from an engagement perspective. And so that's probably one of the biggest escalations I know I've had to deal with on a number of projects I've had.
Right.
Trying to get around, and I based around some of the steering committee, why I even asked my question earlier around trying to get ahead of some of that, learning some best practices from yourself and your experiences, and that I can apply within my own project.
Right. Got it. Cool. No, thank you, Ian. I appreciate the feedback. So absolutely. So as you see from Ian's example, and then what we talked about, the premature late escalations, definitely top of mind, and definitely probably the most things we got to focus on. And hopefully some of these strategies that we talked through will kind of help you with that. So let's next go into talk about a case study. In this case study, I will give a recent example of a KW3 client that we worked with. It was a regional bank down in Southern California, and we were managing and leading and implementing a business intelligence project. With this particular project, this was mandated by the CFO. The bank had gone through a number of acquisitions, and the CFO was having a really, really tough time in pulling together all of the stated financials that needs to be reported to the street So the 10K, 10Q, just given that there was so much mergers and acquisitions, everything was different systems. A plus 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 didn't equal 2. So given that, he had a heck of a time trying to pull together all of the necessary data so he can produce all the annual report type of information and data. So the bank had actually hired someone, and that person was on the ground maybe about 3 months or so, and had not made any progress whatsoever. And our day 3 on the project, the client actually fired the head of this project, and the CEO called us in the very next morning at 8 a.m. saying, "Can we actually do this project? Can we implement this project?" And the answer was yes, of course. And very quickly, we had to create that consistent status view and reporting structure to get him to feel comfortable, because we knew that this project was going to be a very intense one. It was going to be one that would probably have escalations in it, just given the nature of how it all started and the easiness of the executives. So we kind of created that consistent status view. We established all of the appropriate process at place and how we wanted to do the steering committees on a weekly basis and everything as well. The challenge came in is that there were a couple of resources on the actual project from the client side that weren't happy that we were there, and they were very nervous about what was going on, very emotional driven, not necessarily fact-based. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, to be quite frank, they wanted to be the heroes of this project, not the outside consultants coming in, and they wanted to be the heroes of the project. And we did our best to partner with the resources to get their feedback, to develop that partnership. But ultimately, that still wasn't working. So what happened throughout the course of the project was many premature escalations that were not based on fact, but they were based on emotion. We received midnight emails probably at least a couple times a week from the CEO about one thing or another. We were called to the offices at 7 a.m. in the morning to meet with the CFO and the CEO and whoever else needed to be there to talk about the premature escalations. And the challenging fact is that it was just the level of disruption that these premature escalations happened and how much churn we had to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the client resources that were causing these premature escalations really wanted to be the hero. And they were really looking for the opportunity to get more face time with the executives so they could help prove their worth, but definitely at the project's expense from that standpoint. So very, very challenging project. The CEO was like a pit bull. He was very driven. He was tenacious. He was very blunt, driving. He wanted the facts. He didn't like excuses and all that. So it definitely caused a lot of churn on the project. With the stats reporting definitely helped. From a solution standpoint, like I mentioned, the stats reporting that we had there helped big time. Our premise was to stay with the facts and be fact-driven and only talk about the facts. And if there were questions that were maybe more emotion-based or were less fact-based, we asked for supporting detail to support that. In addition, we did also request additional time with the executives on top of the steering committee meetings, more regularly with the CFO to meet with him every other day to review status, so we could be more proactive and get ahead of any premature escalations that may come up even further. And so we would meet with him every other day. And we actually included the individuals that were causing the premature escalations. We actually included them in the actual conversations with the CFO as we reviewed status, and to help kind of limit some of the swirl. It helped a lot, and interestingly enough, the ones that actually caused a lot of the havoc and the churn with the premature escalations, they only showed half the time. Because we were, once again, leading with facts and getting more and more face time with the executives to bring this project to closure. And ultimately, the project was delivered on time, but definitely a lot of churn, a lot of cycles in dealing with the premature escalations. Let me see any questions out there. Let me see. Got one question coming up here. The first question is, how exactly do you define escalations? With that one, it really is, if you think about a project, with any project or program, you have a budget, timeline, and resources. With that, if any one of those three pillars are at risk, that may require an escalation. So basically, an escalation is an item that requires the attention of the senior leadership team. Now, that attention to the senior leadership team, it may be one of two things. One, it may just be informational knowledge of the escalation of the item to the senior leadership team to let them know of what's happening, but there's no action required on their part. There may be another type of escalation where, you know what, the schedule, the certain deliverables behind schedule is causing slippage downstream with the overall project timeline. And with that one, there may need to be decisions that need to be made by the senior leadership team that requires attention and decision. So those are the two types of escalations. They're really issues that need to be that need to be made aware of to the senior leadership team. Some will require action, and some will. From that standpoint, so hope I answered your question. The next question is, if you are ahead of the curve, then there's nothing to get escalated. Is that correct? In theory, yes. That is correct. If you're ahead of the curve and if you're thinking ahead of the game, that should minimize the escalations that you deal with. And that is correct. There tends to be sometimes when you do get caught off by surprise. As much as you manage to the work plan, as much as you manage to the actual team. But I agree with your point. In theory, if you're ahead of the curve and you're on track of it all, and if you're managing all of the people side aspect and all the various personalities and able to constrain those issues, and then you have a tight pulse on every person in your team with the work that's going on with the plan, it should be minimal. But that is correct. But there are those times where you're kind of caught off surprise, either due to political issues or due to the fact that you have some team members that may not raise an issue in enough time, which may cause lateness and may cause schedule slippage as well. Great. Good questions. I appreciate that. I think I see one more question here. And this is from Annie Pierce. Experiencing a premature escalation that has not been dealt with effectively by leadership. I'm not sure I understand the question. Annie, can you provide more on your question? Let me open up a line to you, and then maybe you can articulate your question, if possible. She may be on mute. So let's see if she comes back in, and then we can definitely answer her question there. All right. Any more questions at this point? All right. So interesting case study, a lot of premature escalations, a lot of turnaround, a lot of being on call to the CEO at odd hours of the night, midnight emails, midnight calls, meeting with the CFO in the morning time, just given the premature escalations and dealing with various individuals that really kind of caused these. And the challenge was with this one is that these individuals have the ear of these executives, which also have the ear and they always listen to them, which is great, which always kind of caused also the necessary churn that happened with some of these escalations. All right. So thinking about everything we just talked about, from premature escalation, the accurate escalations, the late escalations, as well as thinking about motives and behaviors with a DISC assessment. Here are the key takeaways that I hope that everyone can lead with, and hopefully as you leave here and think about what you're doing on your project or your role or your initiative, hopefully some of these strategies will ring true, or you can hopefully start to implement some of these real time. The first one is leading with a consistent status view and leading with the facts. I truly believe, and based on our experience with W3, having that consistent status view that resonates with the senior leadership will save you time holistically, no doubt about that. And so leading with a consistent status view, always leading the facts. Those escalations that are based on emotion or those that are late, you always try to do your best to minimize all those, but sometimes they do happen, even without your control. So leading with the facts will save you time. In addition, the trade-off scenarios are a very, very powerful tool when you're really dealing with those late escalations that you were surprised by, and there's an impact to schedule or timeline or resources or budget. Having that trade-off scenarios, following that process, following that framework, will definitely minimize the churn and help ease the conversation with the executives as you look to move the project forward and really kind of get their buy-in on where to from here. In addition, consensus building. A lot of this is a people-oriented side of things and dealing with escalations. So having the ear, managing the relationships, and I think as Mr. Brooks mentioned, managing the stakeholder expectations, and really using that to manage the consensus building among the senior leadership on an ongoing basis, whether that's through regular checkpoints, whether that's through the steering committee meetings that you may have, status reports, the consistent status review. Really getting that consensus building will also help reduce some of the churn that you'll see as relates to a lot of these escalations as well. And the last part, is really kind of understanding others. And to me, this is a big one as well. As I always say, when you run a project or an initiative or a program, whatever it may be, to do the work is pretty straightforward for the most part. It may be some challenges here and there, but oftentimes the challenges that we want to cross is really on the people side, and really understanding the people in your project, what motivates them, what are their behaviors, and how you best communicate with individuals on your project team, with the C-suite, with your senior leadership, with your sponsors. That will go a long way for you, and really either using the DISC assessment or the Myers-Briggs, whatever it may be, to really taking time to understand others and really altering your communications to their style so you can be most effective. So once again, key takeaways, there are 5. Trade-off scenarios, consensus building, consistent status view, lead with the facts, and understanding others. So hope those resonate, and hope we can use some of these strategies today as you kind of leave this call and kind of move forward in your current roles and current projects. So that's about it. I did want to let you guys know also, KW3 is also starting an Off the Gantt training series. Escalations is just one piece of kind of moving and kind of advancing from the project to the program management realm. And with Off the Gantt series, we really hit on the notion of the program management framework in really 2 parts. One, thinking about the program management skills from the status reporting, the escalation management, knowing yourself and others, which a lot of the stuff we talked about today as well, and they're all intertwined together. Then also, it's also kind of elevating the thinking as a project manager to a business-minded thinking and executive-level mindset. So we're actually offering a 1-day training series that will kick off in the beginning of December, followed by 3 subsequent webinars. So if you're interested in that, we'll be kicking off in December. If you're interested, please shoot me an email or reply back to the invite, and I can definitely get you more information about that one. We do have some upcoming webinars coming up. Here are the dates for them. I will be sending out invites for these shortly. The next one will be November 13th at 10 a.m., and then we'll have 2 at the beginning of the new year, one on January 18th and one on February 12th. So once again, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone for attending. I really appreciate you attending our first webinar. Feel free to hit our website at KW3 Consulting, where we're always posting information about our recent client experiences, case studies, and we have blog postings all the time. And please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And then also prior to this call, after this call, you will receive an email in regards to a survey. So please fill it out, and we'd love to get your feedback. Any other questions at this time? Don't think so. All right. Well, once again, that's it. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining the call. Really appreciate it, and have a great day.